Welcome back to the Brojo Online Podcast. Today, I thought I'd tackle relationships. We'll call this Relationship Advice for Dummies. And we're going to particularly focus on nice guy long term relationships and marriages. We're going to look at how relationships are affected by nice guy syndrome. We're going to explore how they're different for nice guys to, say, other people, average people, and what those unique challenges are. We'll look at what makes a great relationship work, as well as what causes toxic relationships and the common causes of divorce, so we know what to avoid and try to counter. We're going to compare the difference between marriage and other types of long term relationships to try and see what difference that ring makes and what you need to consider about being in a marriage or considering starting a marriage. We're also going to look at specifically the issues with ADHD and how that affects long term relationships because it's so often comorbid with nice guy syndrome. And because of my research into the keywords and stuff for this podcast, I just kept seeing it coming up. A lot of people are searching for this. So I thought I'd try and tackle that as well. And then finally, we'll finish up by having a look at how to deal with a relationship that's already damaged. So if you're listening to this from a place of pain in your relationship, we'll have a look at whether or not your situation is salvageable and what you'd need to do to repair it. Nice guy relationships, the definition and meaning, and how this is different to other relationships. So let's start with just defining what an actual basic relationship is. I'd say a relationship is a romantic partnership where two people have explicitly crossed the line from dating or friendship or something else into a committed partnership with a label like girlfriend, boyfriend, husband, wife, husband, whatever it is. You're now calling yourselves in a relationship. It's got a romantic sexual theme to the connection, and there is boundaries around the level of commitment and loyalty that is expected of each other. That might seem really obvious, but it's amazing to me how often people confuse this with attraction and connection, which I've done previous content about before. They think that if I'm dating someone and we really like each other, that's the same thing as being in a relationship. And yet, if you haven't explicitly crossed that line, then you just have attraction and maybe a connection. You might think because you get along really well with someone that you have some sort of ongoing relationship with them. But if you haven't sat down and talked about what is this relationship and what are the boundaries, then you're still just in a connection. So relationships are really the introduction of boundaries to a long-term connection, to a repeat connection with somebody you see often or have contact with often, regularly. The relationship element is just the boundaries and the rules around how you're going to engage with each other. And the issue for nice guys is that these boundaries are rarely well defined. It's often very poorly defined. There's very few of them. A nice guy can easily be in what he thinks is a relationship for many years, and not once have they actually sat down and talked about what it means to be in a relationship and what the rules and expectations are. It's all just implied and hoped for. Now, relationships obviously exist on a sliding scale from really healthy and helpful all the way down to horribly abusive. And boundaries, with how well they're maintained and defined, how well boundary breaches are confronted and dealt with, that generally decides where the relationship sits on the healthy to abusive scale. So often I'm working with nice guys who have been divorced or had disastrous relationships, and they're trying to figure out why. And the first thing we go to is, well, let's have a look at the boundary setting. Let's have a look at the relationship. And what we'll see is a high correlation between what felt like an abusive relationship and poor boundary setting and boundary enforcement. So nice guys, the boundaries are either covert contracts, which means that they're kept inside and hoped for, and they're not spoken aloud. You might hold someone to account for breaching those boundaries, but not explicitly. You'll just sulk or punish them or give them the cold shoulder when they've done something you don't like, but you don't actually say that I want you to do this or I don't want you to do that. Covert contracts are absolute poison for relationships. I've already done a whole video on that. Well, the boundaries are just non-existent. The pushover type nice guy is just fawning all the time and just doing whatever it takes to make his partner happy. He has no internal sense of what's right and wrong. He just adjusts to his partner and her pleasure. Well, the boundaries are inconsistent. They're based on mood and feeling. And what happens today doesn't match what happens yesterday or tomorrow. You just come up with rules as you see fit. This poor boundary setting practice comes from an innate nice guy belief that confrontation is bad. the conflict avoidance thing that most nice guys have in common. We think that confrontation hurts relationships, and so boundary setting, which is obviously such a provocateur for confrontation, gets put aside. We avoid anything that might cause a fuss. And so we don't ask for what we want and say what we don't want and define terms for how someone must interact with us and define what respect means. We avoid all that because there's so much potential confrontation there. One of the biggest epiphanies I ever had in my life that really helped my nice guy recovery accelerate was understanding that confrontations are good for relationships, necessary, actually. And that an absence of confrontation doesn't mean that you've got a good relationship, quite the opposite. If you've got nothing but pleasure and agreement all the time in your relationship, you're doomed. Doomed. Won't be tomorrow, maybe not next month, but give it a few years and it's all over. And this is because nice guys confuse confrontation with conflict. We think that standing up for yourself and asking for what you want and setting terms about how someone can and cannot behave if they hope to be in a relationship with you, we think that that's a harmful thing to do that always comes with conflict. It always comes with emotional drama and escalating tensions and shouting and whatever else we experienced in our childhood when we tried to stand up for ourselves. But it's important that we separate these two. Confrontation is asserting a boundary. A conflict is a bad reaction to that. They're not actually the same thing. Two healthy people don't have conflicts, but they do have confrontations. So it's not unusual for a nice guy to be in a relationship that's never been clearly defined, beyond perhaps say, we can't see other people, or just whatever his partner says is right and wrong. He never has a say in it. He just placidly agrees with everything. Over the months and the years, this grinds him down into a kind of prison of servitude and unspoken resentment, as everything he secretly wants goes unmet. And he starts to blame his partner for his own feelings of inadequacy and unfulfillment, despite the fact that he has refused to take responsibility for making those things happen himself. And of course, on the other side, his partner will start to resent him for being spineless, boring, flavorless, and for being unable to trust that he could stand up for her because he doesn't stand up to her. The guy will start giving up on things. He lets go of his big dreams for the future. The hobbies start to fade. He stops seeing his friends. And basically, he just starts catering to his wife or even his children, their demands and their needs, always prioritized. He's always self-sacrificing. And all this does is create resentment from everyone involved. Nobody wins. And yet he'll just keep doing it because he still thinks that confrontation's even worse than this. It won't be until he's in divorce court that he realizes, maybe I should have confronted her, but now it's too late. It creates what I call green light syndrome. The guy becomes so avoidant of any kind of tension that he will not act without a green light. He will not do something that does not clearly have encouragement and permission. Generally, he has to wait to be told to do something or wait for somebody else to lead. I quite often get emails about this being a problem in the bedroom. The guy just does not initiate. The woman thinks he doesn't want it anymore. Sometimes he's actually given up on it because it becomes so confrontational to have sex. But the issue is he can't move without her making the first move. And the woman has to adopt the kind of masculine role in the relationship, whether she's naturally masculine or not. And he isn't even feminine. He's just passive. He's just this follower. So the decision-making, especially for the family, the decisions that affect everybody in the family, get dumped onto the partner. And the nice guy just sort of plays this easygoing, like, I'm cool with whatever you're cool with role that doesn't actually help anyone and just places a huge burden on the partner and also makes her doubt whether he really enjoys anything that's happening because she can't trust what he likes when he doesn't express what he dislikes. This can end in a number of ways, but most commonly for my clients, it ends in an emotionless stalemate, a kind of living with a flatmate situation where all the tension is gone, feels like you're just with a relatively pleasant friend who never upsets you. And of course, this leads to either a divorce and breakup or the long-term silent suffering. So many nice guys have parents who are people pleasers and they've stayed together because they're from a different generation. but that's the only reason they've stayed together. There is nothing left in that relationship. It's empty and hollow. It's just people going through the motions. It's horrible to watch. Solutions. Well, this obviously requires a major reset, particularly around boundaries. Basically, you have to restart the relationship, as in start again with boundaries. It requires not only the boundaries are set, but they're enforced. And I've talked about this in other pieces of content. It isn't just saying what you want and don't want, what you expect, but actually behaving to make that happen, to stand up and make changes when those boundaries are breached. And it's a huge paradigm shift for nice guys, and they don't realize that it's actually attractive and it's going to bring the spark back into their relationship. But they are going to have arguments. They are going to have confrontations. The emotional range is going to get bigger. There's going to be more anger. There's going to be more upset, more disappointment, more confusion. All that stuff you've been avoiding, there's going to be more of. But there's also going to be more happiness, more love, more sexual thrill. It's a package deal to have a healthy relationship. Both partners need to buy in on the reset, because the fact is that anybody who stays with a nice guy and allows him to keep being this way is implicitly involved. They're co-conspirators in this disaster, so the partner has to pull her weight as well, and odds are she's got some shit on her side that's not so healthy. In fact, that's guaranteed. So both of them have to commit to commitment. They have to commit to new boundaries being set. Not only does this guy have to push himself to be more assertive and more honest, the wife will usually have to push herself to be safer to be assertive with and be more accepting and loving when honesty comes out and not to punish it. So think about inserting massive honesty, massive assertiveness, and massive curiosity about your partner. An injection of those three can turn around a nice guy relationship. Now, I help a lot of people with this, so if you and your partner want to get together for a conversation, get in touch, dan@brojo.org, and we'll talk it through. How relationships can work to have the best possible connection. So now we're going to have a look at the stats and my experiences coaching people for 10 years to find the common success factors in healthy long-term relationships, and as well as find the common factors in relationships that break down. I think we have to start by actually answering a question. Are relationships worth it? I see that question being asked when I look up keyword search terms and stuff. It comes up a lot. And what I'd say is I always refer back to the infamous or famous Harvard happiness study, the 70-year longitudinal study on what makes people truly enjoy their life. And the finding was undeniably good long-term relationships. So basically speaking, unless you have a certain personality type, like you're an antisocial personality, perhaps, or a narcissistic personality, for most of the huge majority of the rest of you, having a great partner is about the best thing you can do with your life. It's not the only way to enjoy life, but it's the kind of most guaranteed. That being said, we can also see that having an unhealthy or toxic partnership is about the worst experience a human being can have. So we have to make sure it's a good one. But if it's a good one, stats say it's worthwhile. So what is a good relationship? It's healthy. It feels healthy. You behave in a healthy way towards each other. You treat each other well. You're honest. You don't have to hide anything. It's the person you can be yourself with. You have a deep connection. You know each other intimately, down to the core, your secrets, your vulnerabilities, your shames, your dreams, everything is being shared. You're very loving towards each other. You rely on each other, but you're also independent. You're interdependent. So you're better together, but you can survive on your own as well. The relationship lasts a long time. That in itself is a measure of success. And overall, you have a relationship that will reduce your life regrets. You have the kind of relationship that when you get to your deathbed, all the things that you traded off to have this relationship, like all the fun of a single life, perhaps, you'll look back and go, no, this was the better choice. I'd rather have those regrets than not be with my partner. And I think that's one of the easiest measures here. Another question I see asked quite often is, are relationships supposed to be hard? When people ask this, I think what they're saying is, why is it that I always have so much conflict in my relationships? Why does it feel like such a big effort? Is it really worth it considering it feels this way? What I'd say, especially if you're a nice guy, is if you've got no conflict in your relationship, there's no disagreement or upset ever, you've got a real problem. You're doing it wrong. So relationships aren't free. You have to earn them, you have to work at them. And part of that is the constant confrontations and boundary management between you and your partner. That's the hard bit. If you can accept that cost, then you get these massive rewards. All right. The connection, the sense of being with someone, sharing your life, having meaning through building a family with someone. You can't have that shit for free. You've got to work at it. Just like gardening, you've got to keep the weeds out, you got to fertilize things, you got to clip the leaves. You can't just sit there and hope it'll all grow into abundance. Two people, no matter how well they get along, they're never completely 100% compatible, right? We all have slightly different preferences, slightly different beliefs. If you're looking to find your exact double out there, just stay home and masturbate because that's the only person who's the same as you. So you have to accept that getting into a relationship means sharing your life with someone who's not exactly like you. And the inevitable friction that's going to come up with that must be managed. But like I said, you think of it like weeding a garden. There should be effort, but it shouldn't be strenuous. If the effort is exhausting, you're either doing it wrong or you're with the wrong person. So if you're a people pleaser, for example, being in a relationship may feel exhausting because you're constantly trying to make the other person happy. Well, you're doing it wrong. It's not about making the other person happy. It's about having a healthy connection, which isn't about happiness all the time. And if it feels real strenuous because you're being abused and cheated on and the conflict is just wild and chaotic all the time, then you're with the wrong person. Just got to remember, love is not enough for a relationship. It's enough for connecting, it's enough for dating, but a relationship is about boundaries. You want something to go the distance with someone a person who's going to change over time as well as you. You're going to change over time. For that to last, you guys have got to have a solid understanding of what's right and wrong in your relationship and how each person should behave towards each other for the safety of the relationship. Another way to look at a relationship is it's just communication. That's all it ever really is. Whether it's physical touch or spoken words, the relationship is really made of you spending time and communicating with each other. So if you can do the healthiest possible communication, you'll probably have the healthiest possible relationship. So if there's any one thing to focus on, like, oh, should I focus on my sex life? Should we be doing more stuff together? Maybe we should travel. Nah. Get better at communicating. Always just get better at communicating. There's endless opportunity for growth when it comes to communicating. You can always do it better. And every time you do, your relationship will improve. If you're single listening to this, please trust me on my experience. Transparency from day one, from your first date, you should be totally honest. And that way you've got no burden of secrets, no shame to hide, nothing to repair later on, no surprises that come up later like, oh my God, you're a different person to who I thought you were. That's the kind of shit that eventually leads to divorce. If you want something to go well, be yourself from day one and allow that sort of high likelihood of rejection feeling to happen. Because if they like you like that, you'll never have to put any real effort into this relationship again. You can just be you and be honest, and that'll do all the work. When listening to the other person, try to have generous assumptions. All right? Assume that they're trying their best to be a good person. It sounds kind of obvious, but it's amazing how much the opposite happens in relationships. How often partners will deliberately misinterpret each other to give it a negative meaning when it was really neutral or positive. So when you're listening to them, think they're a good person trying to do good things. Maybe they're saying it wrong. Maybe they're not good at putting the words together, but what's the real intention there? Now, of course, if you're with an abusive person, you'll notice that doesn't quite play out, that every time you have a generous assumption about it, they debunk that assumption. They really prove it to be wrong. But when you're with someone who's good for you, being generous with your assumptions will relax them and they'll put more effort into communicating better. Whatever the conversation is, stay until it's done. Really pay attention and see it through to the other side, especially confrontations. Confrontations kind of have an inverse bell curve. You start all right and then you get down into the valley and it's horrible and pessimistic. And this is where most people bail out, especially on the downhill slope. They try to get out of it. Stick with it. Have a big awkward silence if you need to. Have half an hour to sulk, whatever, and then come back to it. Just stick with it until you come to the other side where you come to some sort of valued boundary agreement. Even if it's just, okay, we're not going to see eye to eye on this, but we've said everything we need to say. Let's move on. At least get there. Don't bail halfway where it's at its roughest. When it comes to communicating with your partner, think of making a mess and then cleaning it up. Rather than trying to get your words perfect, whether it's trying to impress them and be attractive or it's trying to manipulate them into getting what you want, try to just speak impulsively and spontaneously, radical honesty. And then if that doesn't go down well, and it didn't come out right, fix it up together. And that kind of conversation is the most bonding. You say something that's upsetting or offensive or confusing, and together the two of you try to pull it apart to find out what you're really thinking and feeling. And that means you're working together on communicating. What you're really doing is learning to fight well. So when you have disagreement and conflict with each other, you're fighting for the relationship rather than against each other. So as soon as you're having a problem with each other, both of you should be starting to talk about, how do we make sure this conversation improves our relationship, rather than how do I beat my partner in this conversation, or how do I stop them from being angry. A little note I want to make on the side about relationships and social media. I think there's a pretty high correlation between how much a relationship is posted about and featured on social media and how likely that is that the relationship is fucked up, right? Generally, people only express things positively a lot and kind of brag and boast about something when deep down they know there's something wrong with it. They're trying to kind of validate it with others or prove themselves wrong and silence that voice inside them. I've noticed people in the healthiest and happiest relationships never brag about it, don't talk about it. They don't need to. They know it's good. And I think there's almost a chicken and egg situation here, where if you start posting on your social media about your relationship, you actually start endangering it. So sort shit out with your partner, not with the whole world. And don't put out a false front, because you'll start to believe it, or you'll start to wish you believed it. And then you're not going to deal with the real issues in your relationship. And you've got to keep in mind how relationships change over time. You think about, you've changed in the last decade, right? Who you were at the start of the decade and who you are now. I mean, most of you, you'll be like a whole new person. Now imagine that you're with someone else and you both go 10 years together. So multiply your change by their change. And that's how different two people can end up a decade into a marriage, unless they work at keeping their paths together. So if you don't consciously work on walking the path together, you will walk the path apart. People constantly change. You don't see it on a daily basis because the changes are minute, but over the course of a year or 10 years, the changes are massive. If I look at who I was when I was 20, I basically don't align with that guy almost at all. I don't have the same hobbies, same interests, same mindset, same belief system. I don't look like him. I mean, if I'd been in a relationship with someone since then, they would have had to make some massive adjustments to keep up with who I am now. Staying honest and staying involved in each other's lives will prevent the drift. Do as much together as you can and share as much as possible about what's happening for each of you on a daily basis, and you'll keep sort of resetting the connection, and it will prevent the drift. Or you'll identify quite early that you're becoming incompatible, and at least you'll end the relationship quickly rather than dragging it out and wasting time. Now let's look at what relationships last longest by reverse engineering divorce statistics. We're going to look at some of the top 5 reasons why people get divorced based on the stats. And from there, we're going to extrapolate, also based on other studies that I've looked at, what the preventative or solution to those problems is. One of the biggest causes of divorces is the other partner seemingly not engaged in the relationship, not invested in trying to make it work. This is actually, I think, the number one cause of divorce, the sense the other person's not working on the relationship. Should be an easy one for you. Invest in the relationship. If you're going to have a long-term relationship, then it should be in your top 3 list of priorities in your life. The maintenance of the relationship itself should be a project that the two of you are constantly working on together. There should be discussions regularly about the relationship itself, how well it's going, what needs to change, what's working well, and so on. Don't just hope that because you feel good today that everything's fine, because that's the kind of thing that leads to divorce, I'm telling you. Often the person who feels like the relationship's doing okay is the one that's not invested as much as the other person. So it's the other person doing all the work to make it feel that way, and they're getting resentful and bitter. And when it comes to nice guys, that's often the case. By the time the wife emails me my husband, I've had enough. Oh my God, can you save this marriage? The guy doesn't even know there's a problem. Right? He's like, I'm just doing what I do. Everything's fine. Because he doesn't even want to hear about it. He doesn't want to get involved in anything that might be icky. Right. And so she's doing all this sort of secret work on the side, and the two of them are just growing apart. Well, the next biggest causes of divorce is, of course, betrayal, infidelity, cheating. And what you got to understand is for this to happen, there has to be a huge buildup of dishonesty and resentment. Cheating is not spontaneous, unless you got a serial cheater who no longer has to think about it. But cheating usually comes with a huge backstory. It's usually months in the making. And the only reason it's allowed to escalate to that stage where the person builds up resentment towards their partner and desire for other people is because it's not talked about. You talk about it early, as soon as it starts happening, and you can nip it in the bud. So as soon as you're having problems with your partner, you resent something they're doing, you feel unfairness, whatever, or as soon as you start being attracted to other people, even the brief attraction of walking past someone on the street, make that okay to talk about. Because often it's that conversation that cuts off the process before it gets started. And in general, I recommend a no secrets policy. Your relationship should be the one place where you are 100% transparent, as are they, even if you can't do it elsewhere. If you can't do it in your relationship, then don't have one. Another big one is finances. Obviously, financial stress, but also problems between the two people when it comes to managing the money, which is really the cause of the financial stress. People can deal with being in poverty and struggling financially as long as they're on the same team. So when it comes to finances and just resources in general and rules about how the resources are managed, that has to be a joint power arrangement. It doesn't mean that you even have all the same money together or anything like that. It just means that whatever you've got going on is a frequently discussed arrangement between the two of you that you're both totally cool with based on your sort of preferences and styles. In my relationship, all the money is shared, but Lucy gets we both get like money on the side that we can spend however we want. We discuss our budget every month. Lucy mostly manages the personal finances. I mostly manage the business finances. And we just have our roles and we're constantly in communication with each other. We're not doing the same thing, but we feel like we're equal partners. And when we first had conversations about it, they were pretty ugly conversations. And I could see why a nice guy would want to avoid those kinds of conversations. But had we not had them, we'd be having serious problems right now. One that comes up a lot in divorce stats is a different religion, which I thought odd because I have seen many partnerships where people have slightly different religious beliefs work out. And what I realize is when people say different religion, what they mean is different core values. The religions can be different, but the core values cannot be. So your core values must be a discussion that comes up very early in the dating phase. And if you haven't done it yet, do it tonight. You talk about what you believe in, what is right and wrong, what are your principles, what's your code of conduct, what do you think people should and shouldn't do, especially what you should and shouldn't do to each other. There must be an alignment or at least respect for disagreement on that. You know, my wife is Catholic. I would be, I guess you call an atheist, but I don't ever stop her going to church or trying to talk her out of it. She doesn't ever try to enroll me into Catholicism. We let each other have different beliefs. What we have in common is core values like honesty and respect and responsibility and core things that we love to do like travel and dance. Those things need to be aligned. The religion is not so important. And lastly, of course, one of the biggest problems that cause divorce is abuse. Okay, the kind of abuse that comes with someone being an addict and the harm they do their family to outright domestic violence. And this one's pretty simple. Don't fucking do that. Right? Just don't. Don't get into a relationship until you're sure that you won't do that. And if you do it, make sure you go and get whatever therapeutic recovery stuff sorted as soon as possible so that it never happens again. Right? You just cannot have a relationship where you abuse each other emotionally or physically or any other way and hope that it will work out. You should be treating the other person like they're your favorite person, not like they're your fucking enemy. I think that one should be obvious, but apparently it's not. Well, one way to sort of sum this up is using my 3X model of confidence: curiosity, honesty, and respect. Those three principles are critical to a healthy relationship. So curiosity about your partner, constantly explore their mind, stay in touch with what's happening with their life, Try to do things with them, get involved and know them deeply, and vice versa. Honesty. Get it all out, no matter what you're afraid of, no matter how much of a hassle it will be, no matter how sure you are that they're going to react badly. Get it all out all the time. Never leave anything important unsaid. And respect. Give them space. Listen to them and pay attention when it's their turn to talk. Try to encourage their self-development and their growth. Make it that coming home to you is the best experience of their life. I don't mean trying to please them. I just mean being a safe place for them. If you and your partner want help with this, of course, get in touch, dan@brojo.org, and we'll have a session together to talk it out. Relationships versus marriage. What's the difference? Obviously, long-term relationships and marriages have a lot in common, but the ring does do something. I'm sure of that. So we'll talk a bit about that now for those of you considering marriage, or those of you in a marriage wondering, why is it different than when we were dating? And what we're going to be talking about a lot here is how nice guys are affected by commitment. Marriage, I guess, is just one form of commitment, an expression of commitment. But commitment does weird things to nice guys. They either double down on their people pleasing, so they become completely fawning and submissive and do everything to try and make you happy. Or they do kind of the opposite. They stop trying. Now that they've hooked you, they spend their effort trying to please other people, and they kind of just bring the scraps home. It's not unusual for women to be surprised and shocked that 3 to 6 months after what seemed like a wonderful dating period with a wonderful man turns into something else, where the guy is suddenly harmful towards them or indifferent and not meeting the expectations and the precedents that he had set before. So marriage. Marriage used to be to seal alliances between families to prevent conflict and share property and so on. And these days you can decide what it means for you. It can be something you do or not do. It doesn't really make much of a difference. In terms of long-term partnership, you could easily have a long-term relationship for life without sealing it with a marriage. But a marriage can still do something for you. So you got to decide for yourself. For me, marriage was about me finally facing my great fear of commitment. I had an avoidant attachment style most of my life, committing to someone, having someone affect my life, having to consider other people when I made decisions. I had great fears and insecurities around that. And so when I'm looking for ways to overcome my fear, I'm like, well, marriage. And I'm really big on like going all in when it comes to overcoming my fears. I think if you got a fear of heights, you got to go skydiving. So I knew that marriage would be the place where I could overcome those commitment fears and those intimacy fears. And it doesn't mean that everyone should get married. But I came to the conclusion that even if marriage didn't exist, I would do something like that to overcome my fear. I got great advice from a friend of mine who's in a 30-year marriage that's gone well. And he said the thing with a marriage is when you hit hard times, and sometimes hard times can last for weeks, not just days or hours. A marriage gets you to try and commit to see through to the end of that hard time. He said that sometimes they go for weeks without even loving each other, and then it comes back. And it's like a valley they went through, and the marriage was the bridge across that valley. It got them through and allowed them to be patient and see it through, rather than giving up just because it doesn't feel good right now. And that makes a lot of sense when you want to do something long-term, whether it's a marriage or running your own business, something like that. There's going to be times where you lose the love for it and the wins are replaced by losses. And they might go for a long enough time that you start to doubt that the thing's good anymore. Like him, a marriage helps me get through those times. And the other reason I chose marriage is because I'm all about the science, and the stats show that married couples generally have healthier children. I'm not dissing anybody here. It is possible without marriage, but I always try to give myself the best possible odds when I can. So many nice guys like me are avoidant, and so marriage and the idea of it triggers suffocation. Any kind of commitment triggers a suffocation feeling and a freedom seeking. And in the relationship, that might look like porn use or distancing emotionally, cheating, stonewalling, just sort of retreating into their shell, constantly feeling smothered. And anxious nice guys tend to cling to any girl that even looks at them. And so they end up in disastrous marriages. And these are the kind of guys that get cut in half with divorce, rape, and end up being abused by a narcissist and so on, because they just take whatever they can get. So a question that comes up a lot is, does marriage ruin relationships? I think, like money, marriage is an amplifier. it'll just make more of what's already happening happen. So just like if a rich person is greedy, they were always greedy. Money just gave them more to be greedy about. Or if someone's generous, more money won't make them less generous. Sounds like alcohol, how someone is when they're drinking gives you a pretty good indication of what they're like on the inside. So if your relationship is bad, or if there's seeds of toxic kind of unhealthiness in there, the marriage is going to be a disaster for you, for the two of you. And if your relationship is good, the marriage is going to enhance that, right? So you're going to go from amateur to pro. It'll be the best thing you've ever done. And that's statistically a valid thing to say. So, of course, what you got to do is make sure it's good first. Make sure before you think about marriage, you go, this would enhance us. So you've got to make sure you're totally honest. Feels like you're with your best friend who you also want to fuck regularly, right? You share your finances and resources amicably. You have strong boundaries together and no problem discussing those. You're dreaming of a future together. You think if you die on your deathbed that this is a better option than the other ones available, and you prioritize each other over others, including other family members. Can marriage save a relationship? No, it's an amplifier. Fix your problems in the relationship before you get married. Don't hope that marriage will make it better. Right? If someone is bad with finances and you give them $1 million, they're going to end up bankrupt, right? Get them good at budgeting, then give them $1 million and they'll stay rich. If you are in a marriage and you found that since getting married, it seems like your relationship went downhill, and you're quite sure that it was actually all right before you got married, there was just something about that commitment and that ring that did some damage. Chicken and egg situation. Was the problem there before the marriage or after? Maybe you don't know. You don't know whether one partner started it or you did it together. But there is a way to actually fix this. And that is to understand that just because you're wearing a ring and you got the term married attached to you, doesn't mean you have to behave in a certain married way. And that quite often when you're processing along some sort of spectrum, right, you're moving up through stages and you hit a stage and things start to get bad, the best thing you can do is go back a stage or two and do it again, because that's usually where the problem started. So what I'd suggest is that if you got married and then things started to go wrong, it was in the pre-marriage stage that things weren't done right, that things were kind of off a bit and marriage amplified that. So if you can go back to that stage and get that going right, then your marriage can survive. So you can stay married. You might even take your rings off if you want to, for kind of symbolism. But mentally, as an agreement between the two of you, go back to dating. It might be as extreme as sort of sleeping in different beds or even living in different places. You go on dates again rather than just sort of hanging out all the time. You only see each other if you really feel like seeing each other rather than being forced to. You have separate interests and separate friend groups. You build time apart so that you actually miss each other and develop some sort of interest in each other. You might do things like dressing up for each other that you no longer do anymore. And you might start doing some work while you're doing that to see what went wrong the first time. So you read a book like Attached to have a look at your attachment styles to see if something's there. You can maybe get some therapy or coaching. And what you do is you don't give up on the relationship. You just dial it back from, a 10 out of 10 down to a 7 in the process. You go, okay, let's start over from there. Back when it was good. Let's go back to our favorite time, behave like we're there again, and tried to see like where were the seeds of trouble being planted and how we stop that, and then you can escalate again. A really great one is to use just online questionnaires and stuff you can find for couples. We just ask each other the kind of questions that bring out really deep, transparent, shame-ridden, secrets about each other, and just get to know each other again. It might be that you've just become complacently like flatmates and you don't ever really talk properly anymore. You're not really interested in each other anymore. So explore each other deeply. And I guarantee you, any quiz you find online, you ask those questions like, what do you really think about me? Or how do you feel about my parents? Or what are your dreams for the future? You'll find out, hey, I didn't know that. You'll get new answers and you'll realize, shit, we've actually lost touch with each other a bit. And of course, as always, I might be able to help you repair that damage. Get in touch, dan@brojo.org. We can have a conversation about it. I'd like to make a special mention about relationships for people who have ADHD and nice guy syndrome. Whenever I'm doing my research, I find that ADHD issues in relation to relationships comes up all the time. There's a lot of people searching for that, trying to answer that question. So I'll see what I can do about that today. What I'd say is we're not really talking about something specific to relationships. We're actually talking about general ADHD issues and what happens in the relationship. So it's not that a relationship triggers some different person to come out of you. It's just that it's a place where these issues play out. Let's just quickly review some of the common issues that people with ADHD have, and then we'll also have a look at some of the common symptoms that nice guys have, and we'll see how the combination can lead to some trouble in relationships. Now, I've never been formally diagnosed as having ADHD, but whenever I read lists about it and life stories about it, I'm just like, God, that's me. So I'm not even going to go get a diagnosis. I just know I fucking have it. I don't care, but I have it. So let's have a look at some of these. Forgetfulness. That's one of my favorites. I literally cannot hold two thoughts in my head. If I get up to do something and someone interferes with something else, whatever it was I got up to do is gone forever. Impulsiveness. Another one that I do. I act before I think, especially with things that annoy me, like problems I need to solve. I just go into solving them before planning it out. Anxiety. I don't have this so much anymore. I've kind of solved this one, you might say, but it used to rule my life. And in my earliest relationships, I just had a constant nauseous buzz in my stomach, constantly worried about getting things right. Emotional outbursts. Again, I don't have this too often anymore, but there's a buildup of tension and overwhelm with ADHD. It's just such a hard world to navigate that eventually you snap. Talking too much. This one might not actually be specific to ADHD. It's more social anxiety than anything else. It comes from a fear of losing their interest. It comes from an inability to be concise with what it is you want to say. This kind of fear of missing out that I have to include every detail that occurs to me. That speaking means transporting everything in my mind out of my mouth rather than filtering and moderating it. Struggling to pay attention and listen. I think this one does a lot of damage to relationships. A kind of zoning out that happens against your will. You know, it's another one that I do all the time. Someone's talking, and eventually I realize I'm just watching their mouth move. I've lost track when I'm thinking about something else. I don't mean to. I want to pay attention. It's just my brain just has too much to think about, apparently. Being disorganized. I think this one's really only bothersome to relationships when you're with someone who is organized and likes structure and likes things to go well. And it does seem to be the kind of people we end up with. So we instantly irritate them. And then, of course, feeling lost or ignored or unloved or misunderstood. The side effect of what all these problems cause, you know, all these communication issues create resentment on both sides, and then you start to feel lonely. So then you combine this with common nice guy issues, covert contracts, right? Expecting things from people without saying it out loud and just hoping it will happen and resenting them when it doesn't. Alexithymia, being unable to put emotions into words, just end up saying, yeah, I'm fine with everything because you literally don't have the language to explain the physiological sensations you're having. Pukes, similar to emotional outbursts. So a nice guy likes to build up a lot of resentment. Well, he likes to. He just does it. He doesn't mean to. And then he'll snap and it'll all come out very kind of rarely, occasionally. You know, I've got one client, for example, who's just been a model citizen his whole life, and then one day just struck his wife over some minor argument. And the guilt haunts him on a daily basis. He just couldn't believe he had that in him, but he didn't realize that it was actually years and years and years of resentment building up. Fixing rather than supporting, like giving unsolicited advice, trying to control your partner's emotions rather than trying to help them process it, trying to make them convenient. Constant maneuvering and Machiavellian manipulation instead of honesty. Everything you said has an intent to kind of move someone, a hidden intent. And of course, just pretending to be okay, pretending to listen, pretending to care. All these things to just try and keep things nice and smooth when they're actually fake. So you imagine if you got both ADHD and nice guy syndrome, your communication and relationships is going to be basically horrible. And if relationships really are based on communication, as we've talked about before, that boundary setting is what a relationship is, and boundaries are done with communication, and you suck this much with communication, maybe that's why the relationship's struggling, eh? So some things to keep in mind. These are symptoms, not life sentences. What I see far too often these days as a kind of overcorrection around mental illness stigma is now people are kind of proud of being mentally ill and attached to it. So somebody will say, I have ADHD, as if there's nothing they can do about that. As if they've it's like saying, I'm paralyzed and I can't walk. And people with nice guy syndrome do this as well. Once they discover it, they say, oh, I can't help it. I'm a nice guy. Rather than, I can do something about it, that it wouldn't compromise my integrity, make some changes here. So don't be the victim hero. Don't be secretly proud of having communication issues, because there is no syndrome or situation in the world that says you can't work on being better at communicating. And I have plenty of clients, nearly all of them have nice guy syndrome. A lot of them have ADHD and autism, and all of them have been able to improve how they communicate, to be more concise, to be more direct, to be more honest, to be better at listening, and to learn to work with the things they can't control. So, for example, being able to tell someone that you're zoning out as it's happening is more realistic than trying to stop yourself from zoning out ever. And on that note, sort of most of these problems are solved with a kind of work with me partnership. You talk to your partner about these things that you have, not victim hero, like you must work with these because there's nothing I can do, but more like, look, I'm working on them. I'm going to need some support and some compassion from you. I'm going to slip. There's some of these things I'm not sure I will ever be able to change. Let's work together on these, you know? It's like one of my ones is that I react really badly to plans being changed last minute. Even if that change is an improvement, I just have this agitation and resistance to change all the time. And so my wife, Lucy, knows that I have this thing. And so when she brings something up and she sees me start frowning and stuff, she can just ask, like, do you have an actual problem with this, or are you just doing that processing thing because I've changed things? And I can just say to her, yeah, look, I'm doing my processing thing. Give me a minute. I've got to be grumpy for a second, and then I'll be able to look at this clearly. She's like, sweet, sweet. Come back to me. And so we're able to work with this little like reaction thing that I can't stop from happening. And just be honest when these things are happening to you. You had a COVID contract, say, look, I expected something from you, but I didn't say it out loud, so that's my bad. You catch yourself talking too much, just say it. It's like, you know what? I'm putting too much detail into the story. I can feel it. The main point I really want to make is just this, right? You can just catch it and call it out rather than trying to fix it before it happens. And this can actually work to your benefit in the relationship. You can create a kind of yin yang responsibility arrangement with your partner. ADHD doesn't mean you're just totally useless. It just means you have strengths in some areas and weaknesses in others. Yeah, you might not be able to focus, but you have lots of creative ideas. Yeah, you might be a bit disorganized, but you're also really brave with your actions. So maybe, and quite often what you'll see is that your partner is like the opposite. At least that's the case in my marriage. So things like organizing the budget is something that my brain is just not wired to do because I'm just going to want to change things all the time. So that's Lucy's job, right? But being creative in a way that brings money into the house, that's something I can do because I just fucking randomly put out ideas all the time. So that's my job, and so on. So you're looking overall to work with it rather than around it or rather than suppressing it. Bring it into your relationship, make it something you actually talk about, and that alone can be bonding. Of course, if you want more tips on how to work with things like ADHD and nice guy syndrome to make sure you got healthy relationships, get in touch, dan@brojo.org. Can relationships be fixed? Let's have a look at relationships that have gone sour. I'm speaking particularly to people who are in one right now and struggling with it or want to understand a recent breakup. I'll try to be honest with you about what can be salvaged and what just needs to come to an end. Relationships can be hard. Even when you're in a good relationship, it will have hard times. I've been married for 7 years. We've had our fair share of hard times, from external problems like immigration issues because we live in different countries, through to internal problems like losing our connection when we focused in on having a child for the first time. There are hard times in relationships, but some of these are deal breakers and some of them are just trials that are going to make you even stronger. Let's have a look at why relationships fail. And I think divorce statistics are really helpful here because it's not just divorces, it's long-term relationships. I'm pretty sure they fail for the same reasons. It's just divorces is where it's recorded. So here are the top reasons why people get divorced. An unbalanced investment. You feel like your partner's not putting the work into the relationship. Infidelity, cheating, betrayal. Financial stress and financial problems between the couple. Addiction issues. Communication issues, intimacy and sex issues, domestic violence, growing apart over time, getting married too young, and serious health issues. Let's try and pull all of those apart to see how you could fix the relationship if these issues are coming up. Unbalanced investment. Usually this is recorded percentage-wise as being the biggest reason for a divorce, as one partner feels like the other one's not putting in the same amount of work and isn't as interested in keeping the marriage going, and it feels very one-sided. This is where it's really good to look at attachment styles, because odds are what you've got going on is one person is an avoidant and the other person is an anxious. And the anxious one's doing all the work. Anxious attachment people tend to have this 180 flip where they'll desperately try to keep a relationship going and put years and years of effort, then finally give up and just snap and go cold and just divorce, break up, don't talk to me ever again, you're not getting the kids. This total turnaround that they use to protect themselves from the suffering. And the avoidance just in there going like, oh, I thought we were fine, because they've just been keeping their distance the whole time, which makes them feel comfortable. The investment in the relationship should be a regular discussion. The sense of fairness, the sense of commitment, the sense of paying attention to each other and caring about each other's lives should be a discussion that's regularly had. All right. And corrections need to be made when there's a sense of imbalance. And this is where boundaries come in. You should have clear, explicit, spoken boundaries about what a balanced investment in your relationship looks like, from who pays for things to what it means to listen well, to who has what responsibilities with the children, to whose turn is it to put out the fucking garbage. These should be regular, consistent conversations, and most importantly, the meta conversation about how you feel about all of it. Where you feel like your relationship is fair. It doesn't mean you need to do the same. All right. It doesn't mean that you all have 50% of every task. Just overall, it feels like you're each doing 50% of the work. Now, if you're the person who's doing all the work and you're not getting reciprocation, they don't even want to talk about it. They talk about it, but they don't do anything. Break up, at least temporarily. This is going to be my advice on a lot of these points. A lot of relationships that are in trouble need a reset. They don't understand that a breakup would be healthy. And it's like an indefinite breakup. You might get back together. That's still on the cards, but only after changes. And people often will not take your boundaries seriously if they're just meaningless, powerless words. It's amazing. It actually breaks my heart how often I'm working with couples and I just keep telling the one who's struggling the most, break up with them. Break up with them. It's in his best interest. You want to spark the flame in him? You want him to suddenly care? Give him something to lose. Because if he knows that you're just going to complain but stay, where's the motivation? Right? He's just complacent. He's stuck in his fears. Break up with them and he'll go, shit, now I get to figure out how much this actually means to me because I've lost it. Infidelity, the same thing. I recommend an immediate breakup and then a conversation about what significant, measurable behavioral changes would need to occur on both sides for you to get to a clean slate where the trust is no longer an issue. Now, there would be multiple conversations. The person being cheated on needs to be able to say, this is what I'd need to see from you to feel safe that you're never going to cheat again. See from you, not words, changes in behavior. And one who did the cheating needs to talk about the build-up. What kind of resentment did you build up and why? How did you get to the point where you thought it was okay to do this to your partner? What would they need to change? Right? Or what would need to change about your dynamic together so that you never get to that place again? And you stay broken up until you both feel that you've changed enough to start a new relationship on new terms. Financial stress. Most importantly, it needs to be a normal conversation for you to have about the sharing of the finances. Both of you should know where every dollar is, even if you both don't have equal power over it. It's not being poor that gives you problems necessarily, but not being a team and working on those problems together. So there should be multiple conversations. You should be talking at least on a monthly basis, if not more frequently, about your finances, what you plan to do with them, how you're going to solve financial problems together, and so on. Right? There needs to be a buy-in and shared power of arrangement of your own making. It doesn't have to be a set thing that other people use, but the one that works for the two of you, your personalities, your preferences. Like I said, most importantly is you constantly have conversations about money. The reason most people get into financial problems is they just don't want to look at it. They don't want to talk about it. They don't want to think about it. And so they let their money run wild without any supervision, and that's how they get in problems. Addiction issues, real simple. Break up, get clean, then get back together. Communication issues. Ironically, this might be one of the biggest problems, but also the easiest to fix because you can always develop better communication skills. All right, there's lots of free resources on the internet on how to talk to each other. You can get coaching with someone like me or therapy to develop a communication between each other. You can work on the concept of powerful honesty, become more honest and more assertive with each other. There's just so much resources out there. The only thing I would say is you really have to work on it together. Any communication issues should be immediately seen as 50-50. Even if one person is just stonewalling and the other person's trying their best to connect, well, this person's being needy, right? So they're both doing something. There's a reason this person's stonewalling. There's something they're resistant to. So it's not always one-sided. In fact, it's never one-sided. Any problems in a relationship are essentially 50-50. Why do I say that? Because you could always leave. So if nothing else, you're staying in it. You're condoning it, even if you're not the problem. But look up things like radical honesty, nonviolent communication, anything that will help you guys talk to each other better and more. Intimacy issues, specifically in the bedroom. This is a real classic one for nice guys, especially because it's around initiating and risk of rejection that they have such hang-ups about. And it can be a really deep issue. So you might think that sex is the issue, but sex is the symptom of the issue. That's the main way you need to look at it. Okay, if you guys are having problems in the bedroom, look elsewhere for the cause of those problems. All right, they're going to be emotional problems. They're going to be boundary problems. Most likely there's going to be a polarity problem with masculine and feminine. You know, these days with the concept of masculine and feminine just being sort of dragged through the dust, a lot of people are getting into passive relationships where there's no tension and spark. It doesn't actually matter which of you is masculine and which of you is feminine. In fact, you can change roles any given time. There can be the person who's meek and mild the rest of the week, but the dominant one in the bedroom. It doesn't matter as long as there's always the polarity. As long as always one of you is one and the other is the other. Sexual tension and sexual thrill is a result of that. So if you're having problems in the bedroom, start asking polarity questions. You know, who's kind of the man of the house, whether it's male or female, doesn't matter. Is somebody being passive rather than feminine? Is somebody being submissive rather than masculine? Start looking at where else are we struggling that makes us just either not want to have sex or make it such a big deal to us. Domestic violence. It's not quite black and white. I'd say if you've been fine forever and you just had a one-off, then you can work on that together in therapy. But anyone who's ongoing with violence and uses violence to solve problems, just break up with them. Really, there's 7 billion people in the world out there. You can find one who's at least not violent. Growing apart. This is a really insidious one because it happens at a micro level that you can't see that, you know, sort of consolidates into a huge gap later on. It's like the sniper, you know, if you adjust his aim 3 millimeters here, he's 3 kilometers off when he hits the target. So you want to think about your growth as something that's constantly happening, and therefore you need to be doing it together if you want to stay together. Shared self-development's the key here. Like right now, my wife is doing a new kind of diet nutrition plan. It's really for women, but I'm doing it with her so that our health and nutrition doesn't get too far apart, so that we're working on meals and health together. Sharing your finances. Let's say you want to go to a workshop. At least go to the same workshop. Let's say you want hobbies. At least both be doing hobbies and talking about them together and going to each other's competitions and shows to watch. Be involved in each other's life. You don't have to do all the same stuff, but it should still be you're coming at it as a couple. There should at least be a cheerleader and an actor. And the last big one that I had on the list was health issues. So usually this means that like one partner has chronic health issues and the other partner becomes like a kind of caregiver role, and that can kill the romance and it can create a lot of stress and all sorts of other problems. It can basically create all of the other problems we're talking about. You need significant boundaries around your roles. You can't just slip into becoming the person's nurse or the person's therapist. You got to always remember you're their partner, and you got to have a clear idea between the two of you what that means, what it is and what it isn't. All right. So if somebody has serious mental health issues, you're not their psychologist. You're not their therapist. You're supportive. You're loving. You're the safe place they come home to, but they should not be working through their issues with you. If somebody has a severe physical illness, you're not a doctor, you're not a nurse. You can bring them soup while they're in bed, but it should be medical professionals that give them the help. But of course, regardless, your role is going to change a bit. It's just like becoming a parent. Suddenly you're pushing a baby around in a stroller. You weren't doing that before. So there's certain behaviors that will change, just even if you're staying in the partner role. And you've got to come to peace with those changes. Stop hoping that they will become something different, that they're temporary. Stop allowing yourself to get into that narrative of this is somebody else's job. I can't believe I have to do this, or feeling guilt that you feel that way, and so on. Just be like, look, okay, being with this partner means being with someone who has this chronic illness. I have to accept that my new role as partner includes these activities. I have to make my peace with that. That is not a temporary thing. That is being in a partnership. So I've got to decide, is it worth it? And if it is, then I am signing off on it. No complaints. And make sure, of course, if you're the supporting person, that you have me time, that you kind of go away and do your own thing so you don't feel sort of trapped by the other person's needs. And if you're the sick one, make sure that you access outside support and give your partner a break so that you don't feel guilty about burdening them. And make sure you're constantly talking about any of the issues that come up. I'll finish by just being honest about the kind of relationships I think are irreconcilable, that I think you should just break up and move on. When the resentment has gone so bad that it's now contempt, that as you look down on your partner, you see them as less than you, inferior. The Johns Hopkins University has studied this in excessive detail, and they've said, there's this kind of 4 horsemen of divorce, but the main one is contempt. If you resent your partner so much that you look down on them, there's basically no coming back from there. Relationships without trust leading to paranoia. If you just can't bring yourself to let your partner behave, out of sight, and trust that they're doing the right thing, and nothing changes that, no work you guys do on it changes that paranoia, then you shouldn't be together, because it's just going to be poison for both of you. Ironically, the more you're paranoid about somebody doing something, the more likely they are to do it. It's self-fulfilling prophecy. You force them into it. Relationships without sex. I don't buy into the idea of asexuality that much, to be honest. I think there are a few people out there, but I'd imagine it's less than 0.01% of the population. I think that if you're not having sex as much as you're technically able to, I know it's hard with kids and stuff. Trust me, I know. But if there's a reluctance, if there's plenty of opportunities to have sex and you're not doing it, and you don't want to change that, you don't want to work on that, then why don't you just downgrade to having a friendship and allow yourself to go and have sexual partnerships elsewhere? Relationships with narcissists. Now, the word gets way overused these days. Not everyone's a narcissist just because they disagree with you or because they're a bit mean to you. But someone with a narcissistic personality disorder, NPD, or someone with an antisocial personality disorder, they're basically incapable of having loving relationships. Even the ones that are really self-aware and going to get therapy about it and so on are still going to really struggle to be loving in any sort of genuine way. It's like having a pet crocodile and thinking that they love you. They don't. You're just food to them. Move on, find someone else. As I've already mentioned, significant domestic violence or drug abuse, any really bad behavior that might not necessarily be sort of in the relationship, but affects it, and the person's just not showing signs of change. I don't mean promising they'll change. I mean they're actually improving their behavior in a measurable way consistently over time. If nothing else, breaking up might be the catalyst that provokes them into change. But staying there hoping it will get better? No. The best predictor of future behavior is past behavior, unless somebody makes big changes. And the issue came up, people getting married too young. What I'd say is you've got to be sure of who you are and ready for commitment before you get into long-term relationships. All right, people get married too young. It's just probably they don't even know who the fuck they are. And when they figure it out, they go, oh, this isn't the partner I want or need, or staying in this hometown and doing this tiny thing isn't the kind of life I want to lead. That's why I really quite support the idea of waiting, at least until you're in your 30s before you consider marriage, and being in a long-term relationship with someone for years and years before you consider getting married, or at least a few years of intensely honest communication. There's no need to rush into a marriage, into a commitment, till you're sure that you've tried everything there is you want to try, and this is the best option. If you're in a relationship that you think can be repaired and you think I can help you with that, get in touch, dan@brojo.org, and we'll talk about it further. So I hope that podcast helped overall. I kind of covered a bunch of different issues. It might sound even a little disjointed because these days I create podcasts, keeping in mind that I'm going to break them into separate videos for YouTube as well. So I kind of do these like sections and topics. But hopefully you got something out of it. And if you think I missed anything, get in touch and let me know. Thanks again for your support. I'll see you next time.